On this episode, it's a new beginning of a new layout, and that means new possibilities. And even though it's bare foam and unscenic track, the possibilities are endless. It's a tour of the Iowa Interstate's Hills Industrial Spur here on the Hills Line. Hi, I'm James McNab. Welcome back to Des Moines. Now, the last time Model Railroader Video Plus was in our basement, a very different layout was in this space. The fully finished, fully scenic Iowa Interstate Grimes Industrial Track, better known as the Grimes Line. 4 months after the MRVP crews left, the floor I'm standing on exploded. Turns out that our primary sewer line had collapsed, requiring us to jackhammer out the basement floor to have it replaced. That meant that the Grimes Line layout had to go out the door and into the basement. I'll admit, that hurt to do. But after an appropriate amount of mourning for the layout that was, I realized that I would have new opportunities in the same space and could correct a couple of issues that I saw in the design and construction of the Grimes Line. The result is what you're going to see today, the Iowa Interstate Hills Line. From 2012 to 2016, the Iowa Interstate leased an 8-mile segment of the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City Railway, otherwise known as the Crandic, from Iowa City to Hills, Iowa. Sticking with the Iowa Interstate had several advantages. First off, I was already intimately familiar with the policies, practices, and procedures used by the prototype and could apply them quickly to the Hills Line. Had I switched prototypes, it may have been months or in some cases years of research before I had the same level of understanding of how the railroad went about its daily business. Second, I was able to reuse all the locomotives and most of the car fleet from the Grimes Line on the Hills Line. So after 18 months of construction and getting the basement back to level ground, I'm now in a position where the Hills Line is fully operational. All the benchwork has been built, all the track is in place, all the wiring is installed. And I'm now performing a series of shakedown operating sessions to make sure that the plan as designed will actually work for the plan as built. So that's what you're going to see today, a tour of the layout as it exists in its operating state. You're not going to see a lot of finished scenes. There's bare foam and unfinished track. Your imagination is going to be required, but hopefully you'll be able to understand what my goals are for the Hills Line. Let's take a tour. Our tour of the Hills Line begins at the middle of the modeled portion of the layout at Maiden Lane. Maiden Lane was the interchange point between the Iowa Interstate and Crandic Railway. During the lease period, the Iowa Interstate would send a train from its yard in Iowa City down the so-called hill track to begin its day. At Maiden Lane, crews could choose to go south or go north to begin their day. We'll head south to Hills. By far the most complete scene to date on the Hills Line is the Crandic's Lattice Truss Bridge over the Iowa River just south of Iowa City. Since there aren't a lot of commercially available lattice truss models in HO scale, I kit bashed this bridge using parts of a Central Valley truss kit and supplemented with additional evergreen styrene shapes. I didn't originally intend this to be the signature scene for the layout, but I do hope it's something you'll remember because of its uniqueness. There's also a little bit of history and tribute in this scene, since it was in the same general location as the Hickman Road overpass on the Grimes Line, which definitely was the signature scene of that layout. It's also the only part of the Grimes Line that I made a concerted effort to save during our basement reconstruction. One of the ways I was able to speed up construction on the Hills Line is by using commercially available components for the benchwork, in this case, IKEA's Ivar Cabinets. I like the Ivar Cabinets because they give me a quality beyond what I can construct on my own at a relatively inexpensive cost. I was able to paint the legs and shelves whatever color I wanted, and the adjustable shelvings give me a unique place to display family heirlooms and other railroaded knickknacks I've collected over the years. Despite being a commercially available component, I'm still able to customize it to fit my space and my needs for the Hills Line. Here I've taken a small piece of plywood as a place to mount the Easy DCC command station, as well as the protothrottle and receiver from Iowa Scaled Engineering. In addition, I used commercially available literature organizers to build a custom cabinet solution to store my ever-growing collection of hobby and rail modeling magazines. More information about using IKEA Ivar Cabinets on the Hills line is available in Time-Saving Techniques for Building Model Railroads by Tony Custer, available now from Kalmbach Media. We're now at the southern portion of the Hills line and its namesake town of Hills, Iowa. This entire 24-foot wall has been reserved for the town of Hills because when it comes to building and designing rail-served industries, bigger is better. What's interesting though is that the first customer we come across, Hills Grain and Feed, is not a rail-served industry. I needed to include it on the layout, however, because it's such an iconic placemaker for the town of Hills, helping further reinforce the prototype of the Hills line. Despite the large amount of space reserved for Hills Grain and Feed, it still pales in comparison to the 14 linear feet reserved for the #1 customer on the Hills line, Stutzman Incorporated. Stutzman receives multiple shipments of multiple commodities in multiple car types, and each of those car types has to be spotted at specific locations in the complex. That ensures that crews on the Hills line are going to spend a respectable amount of time placing and spotting cars throughout this industry. Without Stutzman, there is no Hills line. We finished up at Hills and have returned to Iowa City, heading north to City Carton. After crossing over Rawson Creek, the Hills line will go over a series of grade crossings and street running with some tight clearances, which were a hallmark of both the Krandic and electric interurbans in general. It gives me an opportunity to model the brick canyon effect that you don't often think about when you're thinking of eastern Iowa. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There's no such thing as the perfect space for a model railroad, and this basement proves that fact time and time again. In fact, just beyond this wall is both the laundry and mechanical room for the entire house, so I didn't want to interfere with basic home functions just to construct a model railroad. So to span the gap, I built these small lift-out sections using leftover parts from the benchwork construction. The lift-outs simply snap into place on either side of the fascia, and power is fed through small DC plugs. The second rail-served customer on the Hills line is City Carton Recycling here in Iowa City. As the name implies, City Carton ships recycled paper products to plants throughout Iowa and across the Midwest. Now this is not nearly as complex as Eldon C. Stutzman in Hills is, but it's still going to be a daily switch for crews on the Hills line. Due to space limitations, I wasn't able to model the entire complex, but I did have space to include both the receiving warehouse as well as several support structures around. Even though this is a secondary customer, it still needs to feel large enough to justify rail service, just as on the prototype. Our last stop on the tour of the Hills line is at the northern end, and what can be considered the signature scene not only of the layout, but also the prototype as a whole, and that's the Iowa Interstate's main line over both the Hills line and the Iowa River. This is such an iconic and photographed scene on the prototype that I've got to give it its due justice, because you're going to know if it's right and you're going to know if it's wrong. The track on top is nothing more than a dummy piece of flex track that allows me to stage another locomotive and cars for that classic over-under shot that all rail photographers strive for, but I'll be able to get on a daily basis here on the Hills line. So I hope you've enjoyed this tour of the Hills line. As you can see, I've got miles and miles to go before this layout can be even considered close to complete. I hope to be able to share that journey right here with you on Model Railroader Video Plus. We'll see you next time.